Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I just finished watching Amazon Prime's new original movie, The Tomorrow War. And this video, I'm giving you guys a spoiler-free review, going over the good and the bad of the movie, as well as giving you guys my final take and my score. Before we get into it, if you guys are new in here and haven't already hit that subscribe button, make sure to do so. Also hit the turn notifications on so you don't miss any time I upload a video or I go live. But without wasting any more time, let's get into it. The world is stunned when a group of time travelers arrive in the year 2051 to deliver an urgent message. 30 years in the future, mankind is losing a global war against deadly alien species. The only hope for survival is soldiers and civilians from the present to be transported to the future and join the fight. Among those recruited is a high school teacher and a family man named Dane Foster, who's played by Chris Pratt. Determined to save the world for his young daughter, Dan teams up with the brilliant scientist played by Yvonne Strahovski and his estranged father played by J.K. Simmons in a desperate quest to rewrite the fate of the planet. So starting off with the good of this movie, I definitely say one of my high points of this movie was the CGI. Other than the monster design, which I'll talk about later, I really did like the CGI in this movie. The settings and all of the different places in this movie were super well done. One of the main settings in this movie is basically a burned down city, and it's super well done. It looks super duper good. And there's also a bunch of underwater sequences that are super heavy CGI. There's a bunch of other places like in the desert, there's snow biomes. There's just so much variety of settings in this movie, and the CGI is so well done in every single place. Another thing I really liked was the introduction to the concept of the Tomorrow War and what that war was. They introduced it in a super great way, and I loved how they slowly brought it into the movie. It did feel abrupt at first, but the way they explained it, it actually made a lot of sense, and they slowly explained it so it didn't feel like the viewer was super overwhelmed by what they were saying. Chris Pratt's performance had definitely carried this movie, and it was absolutely awesome. J.K. Simmons and Yvonne Strahovski were also great in this movie. I love the way that they make Chris Pratt's character the one that the entire movie is dependent on, obviously because he's a main character, but the way they do it is super well done. It's not super forced onto him, and they actually slowly lay it onto his character. There's a great story behind the reason why he's the only one that can basically save the world. Him being the only man to save the planet actually makes sense with his story, and that's what I like so much about it. Now, going into this movie, you should definitely be expecting just a sci-fi action movie, but the fights are pretty basic. But overall, on the grand scheme of things, it's a super fun movie. It is definitely your basic blockbuster movie, but the sci-fi aspect of it really elevates it because of all of the different possibilities with the alien designs and the spaceships and all that kind of stuff. And like I mentioned before, the CGI in this movie was awesome, and I will say that the monster designs were super well done. I just wasn't a fan of them. They were definitely the most unique monster designs that I've recently seen in movies, other than the Quiet Place one, which I like a lot more than this movie's. And I will say the connections and emotions between Dan Foster and Colonel Romeo is super well executed. It's super cheesy at times, but it really does work in my opinion, and I don't want to give away any spoilers as to their connection because I thought it was super well executed, especially when it comes to the truth behind everything and how everyone is connected. This movie also has a lot more suspense than I thought it would. I thought this movie would just be a basic sci-fi blockbuster with massive explosions and massive set pieces, but no, it actually had a lot of elements of surprise and suspense, and one thing that really contributed to that was the score. The score in this movie was absolutely awesome. It matched the tone of the monsters. The monsters were super mysterious at first, but as we got to see them more, we got to see super big groups of them, and the score just got super grand. But now I want to move to the bad of the movie, and I'll definitely say the combat in this movie is super reckless. It just feels like they're shooting with no aim at times, especially in the beginning of the movie. It feels like they're just shooting randomly at the sky, and it really makes no sense to me. Even Dan Forrester and the other character that were in the army before, even they shoot recklessly, so it makes no sense to me. One bad thing about the action was that it definitely gets repetitive. While it was fun and awesome action, we got super similar action pieces within every single battle, and it also consisted of super unnecessary slow motion. The slow motion shots were super overused. It felt like Zack Snyder was making this movie. It felt like they were using them for emphasis, but it just really took away from the big set action pieces. Again, the slow-mo was just unnecessary to me. Maybe it looked cool to them visually, it just really took away from the story to me. Like I mentioned before, the dialogue was cheesy between the two main characters, but I will say that the dialogue was cheesy for most of the movie. It's not that surprising that it was cheesy between the two main characters. It was more family oriented when it came to Dan Foster's backstory and who he really is, so it kind of makes sense that it was cheesy. I just wasn't a fan of it. Now to get to the absolute worst part of the movie, which was the pacing. There were 3 main missions in this movie, and each act revolved around each mission. Some of them were pretty underwhelming. I would say the second and third acts, big action sequences, were pretty underwhelming when it came to the story side of things, but when it came to in the moment, they were super great. But each each act revolving around each mission really made this movie feel like it was dragging on, because each act has to have dialogue and story moments while also having fun action moments. And these action sequences were really long. They were super dragged out at times, but I did like the action. It just felt like it went on for a little bit too long. Speaking of length, I think this movie was way too long. It could have been cut down at least 15 to 20 minutes. There were a bunch of characters in the beginning of the movie that got a large chunk of screen time that weren't even useful by the end, or they had no real big story impact. They felt like they were there for emotions, but we never actually connected with the character, because even in that big chunk of screen time, they were still side characters. They just got a little bit of dialogue in. So I feel like the writers thought that we would connect to them, but we really didn't. The final bad thing is that there's a twist about an hour into the movie that really changes the entire direction of the movie, because there's a big consequence behind that twist. And the twist itself was okay, but up until that twist, the movie is fairly boring. There's one big action set piece before that twist, and then there's the two after. I don't think the twist really did much for me. The entire second act revolves around that twist, but it doesn't feel like it impacts the movie that much. Emotionally, it really should, and maybe I'm just immune to that emotion because I didn't care for the characters, but overall, it just didn't feel like it was the correct impact for the movie. And also, maybe that's because there wasn't much interesting stuff going around the middle of the movie, especially the second act. The second act really heavily set up that final battle, that big final action set piece, but it didn't really do much in the moment for me. So my final take for this movie is that The Tomorrow War delivers an action-packed, entertaining sci-fi movie, but runs for a little bit too long. The creature designs aren't my favorite, but are definitely unique, and while there are flaws, Chris Pratt's performance and the action pieces made the movie an entertaining summer blockbuster that you should definitely check out. Overall, I'd give this movie a solid 7 out of 10. But yeah, guys, that was my review for Amazon Prime's new movie, The Tomorrow War. If you've already seen the movie, let me know your spoiler-free thoughts in the comments down below. Again, if you're new around here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you don't miss any time I upload a new video or I go live. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.